This is a kind of a hybrid TBR book haul video for 10 books that I bought recently or I should be reading and reviewing for the channel. And the first is Death Hunter by Ian Watson. This is a Corgi edition with this really great cover. And I must confess to actually having read this before and not being able to review it because I read it so long ago that I can't quite remember all the details. Nonetheless, it's it's a it's a very interesting premise, and it's a horror science fiction Borderlands story. And I remember being kind of unsettled by it when I read it the first time. Based on this, I read a bunch of his other books and was not as pleased with them as this one. It says on the front, the brilliant ideas man of British science fiction, the Financial Times, you can see there. And I think for this novel, I would agree to that. I'll just give you a little taste of what it says on the back. It says, he built a trap for death and found himself in a nightmare world of the imagination. This is, well, now I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I remember of the novel. Society has a kind of euthanasia element for people who reach a certain age, and there's such a thing as a good death. And so the hero in this book, Todd Hunter, is one of this group of people who are involved in this good death system. But now I can't quite remember why he decides to hunt down death, but he does. And well, I could read it again and review it. So the next one is John Christopher, The Caves of Night. I reviewed The Long Journey or The White Journey recently, and I suspect this is another one of his novels, which isn't really science fiction. You know, he wrote The Death of Grass and, of course, the Tripod trilogy, among others. And I think this is one of his kind of non-science fiction ones, but we'll find out. What does it say on the back? It says, five had set out on that ill-fated trip to Austria's Fronberg caves. Now only three were left alive, three desperate human beings trapped without hope of escape in a vast, crumbling underground cavern where sudden death lurked behind every corner, and one false step could plunge them into eternity. Three of them, a woman, her husband, and her lover. And soon there would only be two. Yeah, so it sounds like one of those adventure thriller novels of his. But that's, I actually got this. There was a whole box of his stuff, and I grabbed almost all of it, except for one book, which was about gnomes, I think. Had the most curious cover, and it was actually it was the bookstore owner who grabbed the gnome book out of the box before I could get my hands on it, which makes me think it's a bit of a collector's item. Anyway, so hopefully that one will be coming up soon. This book, called Sleeping Giants, is a modern book that I bought in Cape Town when we were there last time, Cape Town, South Africa. And I was touring the bookstores and I came across this one. I just love that cover so much. And also, you get that recommendation from NPR, masterful, a thriller through and through. And then, if you look at the way it's written inside, it's it's written in a kind of in quite a curious fashion. It's written in a series of like questions, which intrigues me because I'm always looking at new ways that authors use to write books. And so that might be quite interesting from my perspective as a wannabe famous author. The next one I picked up in a local bookstore, and I bought this really because of that strap line on the front where it says one of the 10 best science fiction novels of the year, and it gets a whole bunch of um, recommendations on the back, and that I've been suckered. Basically, it's like, you know what was all this hot air about? Now, this is nowadays hot air is total crap. This, for example, which you are going to get a review of, Orbital. You can see what it says there. this thing won the Booker Prize, and you can see it's beautiful, it's awe-inspiring, stunning, and uplifting book, an extraordinary achievement. And you might better guess what my reaction to it was, but that's for that's for another video. Anyway, so yeah, this one, Davy, Edgar Pangborn. I'm going to read it and see whether it really is as good as they say it is. This one, this I just this was I got this uh, partly for the cover and partly because it's Brian Aldiss and partly because I have not heard of this novel before. It looks pretty old, and I thought I was familiar with most of his work. And this one, I just, as I say, I just love that cover, and the strapline's quite intriguing. What happens when the British cast off their traditional reserve, The Primal Urge by Brian Aldiss? Two books that I read when I was a young teenager, probably 13, 14, were A Hand-Reared Boy and A Soldier Erect. And both of those are kind of like soft porn books that Aldous wrote. And of course, I read them at an influential age. And I'm wondering, this one doesn't look like those. Those were straight up soft porn. Um, this doesn't look like that. This looks a bit more intellectual than those books. But I'm curious because I never heard of it. I haven't seen it in any of his catalogues, and I've never seen it published in England. But maybe it's just published in a different name under a different title in the UK. Anyway, so that one's going to be interesting. This one, The Secret People, I think I've mentioned it before, or I've seen other people mention it. This is John Win. This one is published by John Bain and Harris, which is, I think those are, it's got a whole bunch of middle names, and those are two of his middle names. And he published under a kind of variation of his middle names a lot at the beginning of his career when he was, you know, writing pulp for the American market. And this was his first, John Wyndham's first novel, and I've read it probably 3 times. I'll read it again. I love it a lot. It's great. Once he appeared fully formed out of the ether, because this is a good read, and it's basically as good as all his other books. And he found his writing style. It seems like in one go, and he just stuck to it, and it's great. It even gets this lovely recommendation from none other than Damon Knight at the beginning, and Damon Knight said this: John Wyndham, our old friend John Maynard Harris, writes with that careful blend of realism and fantasy which seems likely to become a Wyndham monopoly. The new Wyndham, who in 1949 broke a bottle over his bows and started in afresh, has turned out to be something remarkably like a new H.G. Wells, the young H.G. Wells, with that astonishing, compelling gift of pure storytelling. That's interesting because I always thought that Wyndham was kind of ignored by the Americans and in America because he never won a Hugo or a Nebula, and I would rate many of his books worthy of those prizes, but he just never won anything. I think it's because he was a bit of a recluse, and he didn't put himself about enough to win prizes. Anyway, this has got the lovely cover by what's his name? He's famous. He does all those, buxom warriors, really tough men covers, and he's very famous, and I should know his name. But he also did this cover, which is very restrained compared to some of his other stuff. Robert Sheckley is a great comedic writer, and Mindswap is a great comedic book. And I do wonder, I've read it already, I'm going to read it again and review it. Um, Let me just read on the back what it says. Uh, in quotes, gentleman from Mars, age 43, quite studious, cultured, wishes to exchange bodies with similarly inclined Earth gentlemen. August 1, September 1. References exchanged, brokers protected. Exchanging bodies for touristic purposes having become commonplace, Marvin Flynn books a trip to Mars. Once there, the unexpected happens, and Marvin's mind must seek refuge in a series of temporary bodies on different planets with some very surprising results. And as I say, I have read it before, a long time ago. I'm going to read it again and review it. Pan science fiction, classic cover, brilliant. And I do wonder whether he wasn't the inspiration for Douglas Adams. There's another book of his, which I can't remember where it is. I think it's in storage at the moment, which I read and which really rings of um, Douglas Adams books. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Very, you're just like, whoa, Douglas Adams must have read that before he wrote the radio plays. Which then became the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books. Next one, E. Doc Smith. I only bought this one for the cover. Only for the cover. This, for me, this is the archetypal best Chris Voss cover there is. Look at that. It's the spaceship is a kind of, it's oval shaped, but it's all slanted. It's kind of slanted wrong. And it's got all those kind of aerials sticking out of it. It's a little bit symmetrical, but asymmetrical. And it has those tiny little details on it, which give the impression that it's vast. And then what is it flying over? It looks like it's flying over some strange surface, which you can see through. And the sky is beyond that surface. And it's got these funny circular things in it. And then there's smoke on the surface. And some of the smoke appears to be on this side of that surface, and some of the smoke appears to be on the other side of that surface. So is the surface slightly transparent? Voss was brilliant at doing that. You look at his picture and you just spend all your time marveling at them. He's like, just throws in so much detail, weird perspectives. His ships are very, very rarely asymmetrical. They look vast. It's monumental, cosmic science fiction, brilliant, hard science fiction. And, I've never ever read any of E. Doc Smith's works, and maybe I should read this one. Another author who I've only ever read some of his short stories, A. Van Voigt, I think it is. I bought and decimated the weapons makers of Isher. I remember bought a copy like this. I just cut the cover off and you stuck it on my wall and threw the book away. Can you believe that? Can't believe I did that. And I should be castigated uh, somewhere when I get to the afterlife. And the librarian in the sky is going to give me a hard time over that one. And now I desperately want to find it's the same guy who did this. I can't remember his name. The guy who did these covers. I've got the memory of a sieve. It's the same covers that I decimated for the weapons makers for this one. And so in penance, I must read this and then find copies of those other books and read those too, because they're supposed to be pretty good. I feel bad about making that admission. And finally, I found this very recently, Off Limits: Tales of Alien Sex. And the reason why I kind of got it is because I've written a whole bunch of stories in draft about, science fiction stories involving sex. And so I was going to kind of read up around other what other authors have done, other science fiction authors have done with regard to sex. So I don't kind of stumble over just repeating what's been done before, but also to see what's been done before, and it might give me some ideas for my collection. So I will read this with interest. There's a snorting dog down there. Okay, so that's my TBR book haul, and it's kind of a promise to myself to actually read those books, do something about them, and review them. Okay, thanks for getting to the end. Catch you in the next one. Bye.